As the top of our handout will tell you, we're going to be talking about the third speech cycle, which is Job 22 through 27. Now, we've done 2 speech cycles already, and you may say, I've had enough of speech cycles, thank you very much. But I'm going to beg your indulgence to hang in there, because I'm going to frame this speech cycle in terms of the question of self-knowledge. And I'll explain a little bit more about that question and how it really permeates all 3 speech cycles, but comes up especially in the third. But start off with a famous quotation, what is man that thou art mindful of him? Or, what are human beings that you are mindful of them, mortals that you care for them? That's from Psalm 8. It is asking what is a human being, and that's a question of self-knowledge. Do we know what we are? But you can also see that it's a question that is addressed to God. And one of the things we will talk about, how self-knowledge and knowledge of God seem to be correlated. We'll get to some of that. But the quest for self-knowledge is central to who we are. It has to be one of the most important questions. You may know, remember from humanities classes you took in high school or college, the Delphic Oracle. That was the one place in the ancient Greece, more than any other, the preeminent place where you would go to consult or find out the God's will. And it was famous for the priests and priestesses there would inhale these vapors that were coming up from the earth. You remember, Greece is a geologically active area. So there's lots of faults and caves and steam coming up. So this was a shrine to the god Apollo. The priestesses would inhale this and they would go into a trance and the god would speak through them. So the famous story, of course, you know about the king who was getting ready to wage war against the neighboring kingdom, but he thought he'd better check it out with the Delphic Oracle first. Good, you're laughing already, and said, what's going to happen if I make war with the neighboring kingdom? And, oh, great king, if you make war, a great kingdom will fall. And of course the king said, great, baby, here we go. So he went off and made the war, and a great kingdom did fall, and it was his own. The Delphic Oracle neither reveals or conceals, but asks riddles. And our ability to answer those riddles often depends on our knowledge of ourselves. And hence, etched into the stone outside of the Delphic Oracle was, know thyself, as the great command. I have a quote here from Socrates saying, the founder, or at least the preeminent figure of early philosophy, and philosophy means all learning at this point. He says, I still seek to know myself. That's Socrates up in the corner, by the way. Notoriously ugly. You can even see it from that bust. Somebody's having a conversation with him and say, oh, Socrates, you remind me of a great stingray fish. And you really wouldn't say that to someone you were trying to court, would you? I mean, but you can see big flat forehead, bulging eyes, kind of pudge nose. That's a stingray fish. I still seek to know myself, as the inscription at Delphi enjoins. I direct my inquiries to myself to discover whether I am a more complicated creature and more puffed up with pride than Typhon, or a simpler, gentler being whom heaven has blessed with a quieter, untyphonic nature. A couple things that are worth saying about that quote, and these will pertain to Job. First of all, self-knowledge is not, at least not right away, who am I, Richard? What is special about me? What individuates me? Self-knowledge really is, what does it mean for me to be a human being? What is a human being? That's the first kind of self-knowledge. That's hence we get from Psalm 8, what are human beings that you are mindful of them? That's the quest for self-knowledge, that we understand what it means for us to be human. And always this understanding of what it means for us to be human is somehow played out in terms of our relationship with God and the divine. So Typhon, you may know this if you know the mythology, is probably the very worst of all the Greek monsters. He had 100 heads, and he made war on heaven out of pride to overthrow the gods. And Socrates is asking, so what am I? Am I a preacher filled with pride, worse than Typhon, or a simpler, gentler being whom heaven has blessed with a better nature? And this whole question of what does it mean to be human, that it can only be answered in terms of who and what is God. And if you remember way back to the very first class, I said one of the great questions of the book of Job is, what does it mean to be human, and who or what is God? Today is kind of our midterm check-in for those two very closely related questions. If you go for a second to your handout now, self-knowledge, as Socrates suggests, he who spent his life learning, said that his life was learning nothing more than to know himself and know what it means to be human. Self-knowledge is not easy. This is a nice quote from the 19th century philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. We are unknown, we knowers, to ourselves. Of necessity we remain strangers to ourselves. We understand ourselves not. In ourselves we are bound to be mistaken. For each of us holds good to all eternity the motto, each is farthest from himself. As far as ourselves are concerned, we are not knowers. Nietzsche had clearly attended several faculty meetings before he wrote that. That human beings, even though they can attain great knowledge, great feats of knowledge, and often pride themselves of it, that someone, and often it is I, can have knowledge of far off and wondrous things, and yet still lack knowledge of himself. And a contemporary, well, he died a few years back, but an author named Walker Percy puts this in a little more graphic terms for us. He asks, why is it possible to learn more in 10 minutes about the Crab Nebula in Taurus, that's a far-off constellation, which is about 6,000 light years away, than you presently know about yourself, even though you've been stuck with yourself all your life? The question is, why is it that in your entire lifetime you will never be able to size yourself up as you can size up somebody else or size up Saturn in a 10-second look? It is true, isn't it? I mean, you don't do this, I'm sure, but occasionally when I see a group photo and I know that I'm in it, I look first for myself. You do that, and you kind of wonder why. Have I forgotten what I look like? As he says, I've been stuck with myself my whole life. Or when people walk down a city street, you notice they try to catch sidelong glances of their reflection in the store windows? Why is that? Have you forgotten? But some of you may have friends or maybe even spouses where the truth about them is so obvious to you, but that same truth about them will never dawn on them, no matter how many times you try to tell them. Self-knowledge is not easy. And the fact that it's not easy, in fact, reveals something about ourselves as human beings. And we'll come back to that. But for now, maybe you'll just ride with me and say that it really is easier to know about far-off constellations than it is to know about myself as a human being, even though I'm very close to myself and right here. One last thing, the correlation of knowledge of self and knowledge of God. This is the famous opening to John Calvin's Institutes. Nearly all the wisdom that we possess, that is to say, true and sound wisdom, consists of two parts, the knowledge of God and the knowledge of ourselves. But while joined by many bonds, which one precedes and brings forth the other is not easy to discern. Can you see what he's saying here? Knowledge of self and knowledge of God go hand in hand. But which comes first and how they walk together hand in hand, that's a little harder to determine. So he says, for quite clearly, the many gifts with which we are endowed are hardly from ourselves. Indeed, our very being is nothing but subsistence in the one God. Then, by benefits shed like dew from heaven upon us, we are led as by rivulets back to the spring itself. So his first point says, when we look at the gifts and the benefits that all of us as human beings have been given, that in itself is sufficient, or should be sufficient, to lead us back to God as the source of those benefits or gifts. We all think our computers are so smart because they can talk to us and understand us about 2% of the time in a very stilted, mechanical sounding voice. Hang out with a 2 or 3-year-old sometime. The learning curve in terms of language is straight up. And they can take things that we say, as parents and grandparents, and suddenly not only understand them, but put them in a different context where we want to say, did I say that? I didn't mean that. Yes, I know you're quoting me, but it's a little bit different. If we think about the benefits and gifts that we didn't create, I mean, none of us said, oh, I'm going to decide to have the gifts of language. We just have it. And we should, he says, be able to trace them back and see God as the source of such gifts, including our very existence. But then he also says, indeed, our very poverty discloses the infinitude of benefits reposing in God. Now, by poverty, he just doesn't mean monetary or even material things. He means our impoverishment, our need, our deficiencies. The miserable ruin into which the first man, that would be Adam, cast us, especially compels us to look upward. In other words, when we see how much we lack and need, we will look upward to God for help. So both the good things we have and the deficiencies we have should turn us to God. Let's look at knowledge of self. I know my good things, I know my deficiencies. They lead me to knowledge of God as the source of the good things and as the cure for the deficiencies. Hence, accordingly, the knowledge of ourselves not only arouses us to seek God, but also, as it were, leads us by the hand to find Him. The knowledge of ourselves arouses us to seek God and leads us by the hand to find Him. Okay. That's all preface. We're going to come back to the question of self-knowledge, I promise. But, if I can make this work, Brad, for the time being, we're going to start with third speech cycle. And you've got to stick with me, because we're going to do a little bit of hard textual work. All right, so just bear with me, and I think we can do it and even have some fun with it and get back to the question of self-knowledge. You ready? Okay, if you've been with us so far, you know that the first 2 speech cycles are called cycles because they follow a pattern. Eliphaz speaks, Job responds to Eliphaz. Bildad speaks, Job responds to Bildad. Zophar speaks, Job responds to Zophar. 3 friends, that's a speech cycle. Happens twice. But the third speech cycle, that pattern is broken. Zophar never speaks. And Bildad's speech is very short. Just 4 or 5 verses. And so the question is, why? When you got a pattern, it's like Sesame Street. You know, A, B, however it works. You know, you can see it. Why does it break the 3rd time? There's 3 proposed solutions, and I want you to work with me on all 3, because we're going to look at all 3. The text is messed up. Something happened in the transmission, the copying and the recopying of the text, that certain speeches got moved around. The second one is that the dialogue breaks down. The friends speak less and Zophar doesn't speak at all because they don't have anything left to say. They've said it all already in the first 2 speech cycles, and they're kind of running out of energy because they're clearly not winning Job over. So they tend to lose focus, even lose energy. In contrast, Job gains focus on this reading. He gains focus in particular because in places where Job sounds like one of his friends, and there's 3 places, they're on your sheets too, so we can find them, and we'll look at them in more detail. But there's at least 3 places in the 3rd speech cycle where Job says something that sounds un-Job-like. That in fact sounds like something that one of the friends would say. And then on this reading, he's seen as mimicking his friends. So when he sounds like Bildad, when he sounds like Zophar, he's being sarcastic. It's almost as if he's saying, I know you're going to say blah, 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 blah. The third one is unique to me, and this is the reading that I've been pushing and that Jim and I are having some fun debating. And that is, so you know, it doesn't have quite the status of the other 2. You're going to find the first 2 in the commentaries. You're not going to find the 3rd one. That is the hope against hope reading. That Job seems inconsistent He sounds like his friends in the third speech cycle because on occasion he rises to a hope that entails a better fate for himself and a correspondingly higher view of God. This gets us back to, so just remember those, we'll come back to them. Text is messed up, dialogue is breaking down, in particular Job is mimicking his friends, or rather that Job is somewhat inconsistent because he rises to a better view of God on occasion in the first two speech cycles and also in the third. This goes back to our two big questions. You guys, I keep telling you this, and the test is coming. Nobody's given me an answer to one yet. What individuates the three friends? What makes them different? We can talk about that. But I'm really doing the second one. How do we reconcile, without discounting, Job's occasional burst of apparent piety with his more frequent expressions of despair, blasphemy, apparent in both cases? Those un-Job-like sentiments where he sounds like his friends in the third speech cycle, those would be cases of apparent piety. So we're back to this question. How do we reconcile this? And it's a question not just for the third cycle, it's really a question for all three speech cycles. Questions about that? That's a frame, and I promise you we're going to get back to the question of self-knowledge. But any questions before we start? You worried about it? Think we can pull this off? Okay, let's try it. You ready? Here we go. Go back to your sheets now. You got to get your hand out. We're going to start with 26, 5 through 14. We're right in the middle of the third speech cycle, and in all manuscripts, this is attributed to Job. That's important. I'll read it to you. The shades below tremble, the waters and their inhabitants. Sheol is naked before God, and Abaddon has no covering. He stretches out Zaphon over the void and hangs the earth upon nothing. He binds up the waters in his thick clouds, and the clouds is not torn open by them. Remember, he binds up the water in his thick clouds. Cloud is not torn open. He covers the face of the full moon, spreads it over his cloud. He has described a circle on the face of the waters, at the boundary between light and darkness. The pillars of heaven tremble and are astounded at his rebuke. By his power he has stilled the sea. By his understanding he struck down Rahab. By his breath the heavens were made beautiful. His hand pierced the fleeing serpent. These are indeed but the outskirts of his ways, and how small a whisper do we hear of him. But the thunder of his power, who can understand? Okay, especially that last verse is really nice, isn't it? But stop for a second. Work with me now. This is going to be kind of a test through the speech cycles. Can you see why this, even though it's attributed to Job in all the manuscripts, including your Bible, can you see why to some people this sounds un-Job-like? What's this passage saying? That the heavens are, the whole creation is orderly. Look, what's that? Holy, yeah, orderly. He's put it all together, right? He puts the water in the thick clouds, and the cloud is not torn open by them. He's put a boundary between light and darkness. He's described a circle on the face of the waters. This is a famous, and I'm not as good as Jim, so I couldn't do it for you. This is a famous William Blake etching. He has God leaning down from heaven with this kind of compass, like he used in geometry, giving a boundary to the waters. This is all saying that God has ordered the universe. Look at that last one, verse 13, second to the last. By his breath, the heavens were made beautiful. And at the same time, everything we know are but the outskirts of his ways, a small whisper. But the thunder, who can understand that? You're too small to understand God. There is an order here that we can just begin to glimpse, but the immensity of the order itself is far beyond us. Can you see why that sounds a little bit un-Job-like? It sounds like the Friends, doesn't it? No, yeah, you're suffering, but there's order here. Trust me, the order is just bigger than you can comprehend. But in all our manuscripts, it's Job who says this. Questions about that so far? Now, this is not me alone. Most of the commentators see this, as I say, as an un-Job-like sentence. At least it's not consistent with his more frequent expressions of complaint, despair, God, where are you? Everything's a mess. The wicked are prospering. The good people are getting it in the neck. Right? That's not saying that there's an order. That's what Job has been saying for the most part, with occasional exceptions, as I've talked about. Yes, Glenn?
Isn't that show his great, deep, not only have a more room for it, his faith that he has in hope in God.
Okay.
It's so deep that it's all about.
Good. You're arguing for the teacher's thesis. You get an A+. Now, yes, so you got it. John is saying, and I'm skeptical, I'm not going to kiss up to this guy. Okay. That's okay. No, that's my reading. Because remember, what I'm trying to do is give legs to the ancient reading, that Job really is an exemplar of faith. And that was the way the ancient church read Job. But moderns have scratched their head and said, how is this possible? Because throughout so much of the middle sections of Job, which is the great majority of Job, chapters 4 through 37, Job seems to be screaming at God, saying that God is an enemy, that God is a killer. We saw some of those passages last time. So yeah, I'm trying to say that there is occasional rising up to a level of hope, of faith, calling it hope against hope. This could be one of them. But just take the other view. This does sound a little bit more like the modern view, that Job is consistently shaking his fist at God, at least through chapters 4 through 37. This doesn't sound like Job, and yet all the manuscripts have Job saying it. See what I've got? Good. Kim, there was a question?
No, I'm going to reiterate what Glenn said. There's a powerful statement of faith.
Okay, good. And you get the A+ too. We can end class right now. This is good. But let's jump for a second, and I appreciate that. I really do. I'm not being flippant. Let's go to page 3. Yes, hand? Good. Yeah, thanks.
On mine, commentary,
Yeah.
it has Job interrupts verses 1-4. In 5-14, it says Bildad continues. And then in 27. So
Oh.
this is attributed.
Oh, absolutely. I'm so glad. See? Wait. What they've done is they put the cut and paste suggestion in the footnotes. Remember I said somebody says that the speeches are messed up. That in the copying and the recopying, certain passages that should have been given to Bildad were given to Job. Right? And see, that's exactly what I'm about to argue. So that Oxford Bible essentially takes, remember my 3 proposed solutions? One is the text is messed up. If the text is messed up, you have to fix it. And what you do is you fix it by cutting and pasting. Okay? So yes, this is proof. You're actually agreeing with the teacher. Now, not the teacher's own thesis, but I'm trying to say this is the proposed solution, that the text is messed up and we need to rearrange it. That's proposed solution number 1 on your sheets. And I'm trying, this is where your eyes can swim a little bit. I'm really going to try to show you as best I can how people want to cut and paste to rearrange the text. So here we are. You ready? You're going to stick with me? Bottom of page 2. They want to take 26, 5 through 14, right? And stick it right at the end of 25, 1 through 6. And that's exactly what your Bible did in the footnotes. They said 1 through 4 is an interruption on Job's part. So they want to take 26, 5 through 14 and attribute it to Bildad and add it immediately after 25, 1 through 6. You say, what does 25, 1 through 6 is? Well, I put it on your sheets here. Then Bildad, the Shuhite, answered, dominion and fear are with God. He makes peace in his high heaven. Is there any number to his armies? Upon whom does his light not arise? How can a mortal be righteous before God? How can one born of woman be pure? If even the moon is not bright and the stars are not pure in his sight, how much less a mortal who is a maggot and a human being who is a worm? Now, on this way of rearranging the text, Job interrupts for 4 verses, and then Bildad picks up and says 26, 5 through 14. The problem is that's not the way the biblical text reads. The biblical text reads in 26:1, Job answered, and according to the biblical text, he just keeps talking. So according to the biblical text, Job is the one who says 26, 5 through 14. But the first job in the rearrangement is to say, no, that was really Bildad, cut and paste, put it right after 25, 1 through 6. And remember I said, Bildad's speech is very short. So this would be a way of lengthening Bildad's speech. I'll give the other side its due, even though they're wrong. I'll give them the stronger points of their argument. Did you see it? Am I losing you? Okay, if you follow it, okay. I told you I was going to make you work today. I really did. You're going to have to work on this. All right. Deep breath, because we're not done yet. 27, 13 through 23. Again, in all manuscripts, what follows is attributed to Job. This is the portion of the wicked with God, and the heritage that oppressors receive from the Almighty. If their children are multiplied, it is for the sword, and their offspring have not enough to eat. Those who survive them the pestilence buries, and their widows make no lamentation. Though they heap up silver like dust and pile up clothing like clay, they may pile it up, but the just will wear it, and the innocent will divide the silver. They build their houses like nests, like booths made by sentinels of the vineyard. They go to bed with wealth, but will do so no more. They open their eyes, and it's gone. Terrors overtake them like a flood. In the night, a whirlwind carries them off. The east wind lifts them up, and they are gone. It sweeps them out of their place. It hurls at them without pity. They flee from its power in headlong flight. It claps its hands at them and hisses at them from its place. Okay, we'll play the game again. Can you see why many readers have looked at this and said, this is an un-Job-like statement? It sounds more like one of Job's friends. Because what's this passage saying? The wicked are going to get it in the neck, right? There is justice in the world. It may be justice temporarily delayed, but that justice will soon enough become manifest. And yet it's Job who said this. And if you remember, right in chapter 21, the end of the second speech cycle, Job said, there is no justice in the world. The wicked don't get it in the neck. As far as I can see, they're doing pretty well. And keep on doing pretty well. So you can see why people say, well, how can Job be saying 27, 13 through 23? Now, solution one is the text is messed up. This expression really should have been said by one of Job's friends. And remember, we've already kind of filled out on proposed solution number one, we filled out Bildad's speech, made it a little longer. But who hasn't spoken, who doesn't speak, if you read the text, in the third speech cycle? So what are we going to do with this un-Job-like? We're going to give it to Zophar. Right? And say Zophar is the one who said this. And you can see, watch one more, going backward a little bit, and this is kind of messed up too, because this un-Job-like sentiment occurs earlier in the third speech cycle. So, real quick, all manuscripts, 24, 18 through 25. All manuscripts attributed to Job. Swift are they on the face of the waters. Their portion in the land is crushed. No treader turns toward their vineyards. Drought and heat snatch away the snow waters. So does Sheol snatch away those who have sinned. The womb forgets them. The worm finds them sweet. They are no longer remembered. So wickedness is broken like a tree. They harm the childless woman and do no good to the widow. Yet God prolongs the life of the mighty by his power. They raise up when they despair of life. He gives them security and they are supported. His eyes are upon their ways. They're exalted a little while and then are gone. They wither and fade like the mallow. They are cut off like the heads of grain. If this is not so, who will prove me a liar and show me that there is nothing in what I say? Some of those poetic turns of phrase are a little hard to get, but I do think you can get the overall import of that, which is the wicked are going to get it. there is justice. It may again be justice, temporary delayed, but they are going to get it. So solution number 1, parts B and C, takes 27, 13 through 23, 24, 18 through 25, smushes them together, and says, that Zophar is missing speech. Okay? So far, so good. Do you see how proposed solution number 1 works? Okay? All right, here we go. I'm going to raise 2 problems with it. The whole manuscript tradition is unanimous. These things were said by Job. And the danger is always that cut and paste is serving not as a means to reconstruct the original text as it actually was, but as a means to cover up our interpretive inadequacy. So if we cannot figure it out, what do we say? Well, there's a problem with the text. Right? The inconsistency is not, I don't have a big enough interpretation to encompass an apparent inconsistency. The inconsistency is in the text itself. Now, hear me say, I think there are times we have to go there and say the text is messed up. But hear me also say, it's a last resort. And whenever you say the text is messed up, you really have to say, but I welcome anybody who can restore the integrity of the text as it has been given to us. Because the idea is, if it's been messed up, why is the manuscript tradition unanimous this way? You know, oftentimes we say a text is messed up because one branch of the tradition has it this way, and another branch has it that way. So there's good reason to believe there was some kind of miscopying. Here's one more. Give me an account of how it got messed up. How could a scribe make this mistake? You can say, well, they were sleepy. They prayed a lot in the monasteries, you know, that kind of thing. But look, they're dealing with sacred text. And they want to get it right. There is a strong predisposition that they were being careful. I think we have to take that. Now, look, how do you make mistakes? Have you ever noticed this? That if the same word is in line 14 as in line 16, your eye will tend to jump and you'll go right to line 16, skipping line 15. Now there's lots of manuscript errors that we can explain that way. He was copying, and look over here, and your eyes goes right down. But this isn't repetition of word, drop a line. This is some serious paragraph cutting and pasting that's being recommended. There's also one, and this is famous, I'll give you this. You're going to all be textual critics. I will just say it. Textual critics by the time we're done. The principle of manuscript interpretation, manuscript now, not text, manuscript, is always lectior difficilior. I think I got that right. That's Latin, and it means go with the difficult reading. So the harder the reading, the more likely it is to be genuine. Because those ancient copyists were confused and troubled by the same difficult readings that we're confused and troubled by. So often, speculation, but it's probably right, they would write a gloss out in the margin to try to explain this difficult word or passage. But the next copyist, copying this text over, might do what with that gloss? Put it in the text. So if you've got a simpler word or an easier reading, it's less likely to be authentic because the copyists like us were confused and trying to make sense of things. The more, I know it sounds weird, but the more difficult and troublesome it is, the more likely it is to be authentic and original. That's kind of fun, isn't it? Now, there's limits to this. Sometimes it's just a mess, and you have to say, we got to do something with it. But, so my complaint is unanimous manuscript tradition, and how did the copyists make these kinds of mistakes? How could that happen? Give me a plausible account. Go, Don.
My question is, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, was any of Job found in the Dead Sea Scrolls?
That's a really good question. I wish I had the answer. Joe, go ahead.
Yes.
Okay, how much?
There are about 27 fragments of it, but I don't know how much of it was found by the fragments.
Okay.
Going to a website that has pictures of the Dead Sea Scrolls.
I'm relying on Ballantyne's interpretation. He's got this big book on here. We got it in the library too. And Ballantyne says, and cites a couple other commentators, that the manuscript tradition, which I guess would include the Dead Sea because he knows about it, is absolutely unanimous in attributing all three of these passages to Job. There is no discrepancy. And there are discrepancies in the Job tradition of manuscripts. There are places where the manuscripts deviate, but not here. Okay, so your job when we're done is to say which of these three proposed solutions you like best. So we've only done number one, right? Let's go. We got to get moving. Number two, because I still got to bring it back to self-knowledge. This will be quicker to go with. This wants to say, in places where Job sounds like one of his friends, and we've just in the third speech cycle, and we've just read those three places, he is in fact mimicking, mocking his friends. He's quoting them and saying it sarcastically. And obviously this solution, it's got some merit, because what it says is, yes, Job sounds like his friends in these passages. That's absolutely true. And yes, the manuscript tradition is unanimous. So the right solution, interpretive now, is he's mocking them. He's being sarcastic. I'll propose a problem. See if you think how serious this problem is. All three passages come immediately after verses in which Job sounds very Job-like. In 1 through 4, 26, 1 through 4, he's complaining that his friends are rotten comforters. That sounds very Job-like. We turn into this mimicking with absolutely no textual clues. Okay? There are no markers to show that now he's being sarcastic, ironic, or mimicking them. See, this is the danger in saying, oh, this is a hard passage. The speaker might give you the side. Human beings can be upright. They can be like gold. They can be faithful and true to God's paths. And he also says, this is all from Job, God is our Redeemer. He has concern for the well-being of his creation, including some of those passages I just gave you, right? How beautiful he made the heavens. He cares about the righteousness and wickedness of human beings. If you take that Job says all the things that the text says he says, Job says that. He runs that gamut, that broad spectrum, in addressing these two great questions, what is a human being and who and what is God? And turn it over, page 5. This has been part of my thesis. Job's running the gamut reflects the dire situation he's in. If you were here when I did the Linda Pastain poem, you remember that lovely line that grief is a circular staircase? That rather than being 5 easy stages that we get out of grief, we keep ascending and descending, visiting and revisiting, and the poem ends the way it begins, I've lost you. So part of me was saying the psychology of grief and faith is that we do go up and down. We do sometime in despair shake our fist at God and say, where the hell are you? And that other times we do find the strength to say, even though he slay me, I know that I shall see God face to face. And that's part of the psychology of faith. That was last week. But what I want to say is, Job's running the gamut not only reflects the psychology of grief and the psychology of faith, it also reflects the reality of the human situation. And to make that clear to you, I got to go, just for fun, I hope you'll like this, because I really do like this author, a guy named Blaise Pascal. 17th century French, great scientist, mathematical prodigy. Had a wonderful religious conversion and lived in a kind of religious commune for a while. Pascal is beautiful. You may know his work. He's frequently quoted, the pensées, the thoughts. It was left unfinished at his death. And Pascal says this, we first must become aware that human beings are both great and wretched, both great and insignificant. Remember, our question for today is, what is a human being? And we are both great and insignificant. And the clearest way I can give you this is that the philosopher-scientist can walk along, he can look up at the heavens, and he can know their secrets. He can think, as Isaac Newton said, the thoughts of God after God. And he can slip on a banana peel, too, while he's doing it, and land on his arse. And it's funny, isn't it? Because it reflects our dual condition, that we are both great and wretched. We can know the eternal truths of the heavens and mathematics, and one little microbe can kill us tomorrow. And we know it. We are both great and wretched, great and insignificant. That's what it means to be a human being. The corollary, and of course, what happens is, this explains the huge vacillation in human affairs between pride, we can know everything, we can master the universe, and despair. In the end, we're cosmic dust in the universe. I always said that in the space of 7 hours on a Thursday on a typical college campus, you can see this vacillation. Right? Because the professor's in there, and the students too. You know, we can understand the universe and all the truths in it. And then look at the parties Thursday. You do know it's Thursday, don't you? Okay, good. Just checking on that. Thursday night. So what you see is intellectual pride, followed by eat, drink, and be merry, because tomorrow we die. Despair, cosmic dust, wretchedness. And really, in 12 hours on a college campus, you can see it dramatically, beautifully. The corollary to this, our greatness and our wretchedness at the same time, is, and this is a great Pascal phrase, we are the glory and the garbage of the universe. Both at the same time. This is the moral corollary. Human beings can do acts of heroism and self-sacrifice that still can bring tears to my eyes and make me think, no human, how can I be of the same species? This is such a grand and wonderful act. We can talk about our favorite examples from literature and real life, but I bet you have some. And if you don't, I'm sorry. Right? Huck Finn saying, "I'll go to hell for Jim" is one of mine. How can we be of the same species? This is such a grand and wonderful act. And then we can look at other human actions and say, how can we be of the same species? This is the most god-awful thing I've ever seen in my life. And a human being did it. I used to have a teacher who's a Texas philosopher, was not going to affect a British accent, taught ethics. He would put his cowboy boots up on the table, seminar table, flick his cigar ash and say, "Don't compare man to the animals. It's an insult to the animals." No animal tortures for pleasure. Human beings do. Right? There's your corollary, right? The glory and the garbage of the universe. Okay, that's Pascal's first move. We got 2 more moves to make. Joe, go.
I downloaded the complete Dead Sea Scrolls text that was in English from Amazon. Job is there, it's in Aramaic, but it doesn't help your problem.
Good.
Because it starts in God's speech.
Right, 38. Phew, thank you. All right, good. All right, good. That's a problem with technology. You can check me now. Okay. All right. Here's another interesting one. Because we are both glory and garbage, because we are both great and wretched, great and insignificant, Pascal says we don't like to think about it. What we want to do is divert ourselves. So he's got this famous section in Pensée called Diversions. And he tracks all the way that humans divert themselves. And this is diverting ourselves from knowing ourselves. We don't want to know that we're both great and wretched. We don't want to know that we're both glory and garbage. It's too painful, too terrifying. So what we do is throw ourselves into diversions. And he says this, imagine any situation you like, add up all the blessings with which you could be endowed. To be king, that's still the finest thing in the world. Yet if you imagine one with all the advantages of his rank, but no means of diversion, left to ponder and reflect upon what he is, this limp felicity, happiness, will not keep him going. He is bound to start thinking of all the threats facing him, of possible revolts, finally of inescapable death and disease. You know this is true. Some of the wealthiest and most powerful Americans have illustrated this. Look at Howard Hughes. I mean, he ends his life a hypochondriac, absolutely terrified of his own death, despite all his power, because he's not able to divert his thoughts from the ever-present possibility of his death. Remember that little microbe? He was living in he was trying his best to live in a germ-free environment. With the result that he is deprived of the so-called diversion, he is unhappy. Even somebody with everything, even more unhappy than the humblest of his subjects who can enjoy sport and diversion. And Pascal continues, the only good thing, and I put good in scare quotes because it's not really good, it's just a desperate move, thing for men, therefore, is to be diverted from thinking of what they are. We don't want self-knowledge. Either by some occupation which takes their mind off of it, or by some novel and agreeable passion which keeps them busy, like gambling, hunting, some absorbing show. In short, by what is called diversion. And then Pascal concludes, This is why the National Football League is so popular. He was prophetic. Okay, actually that reads something like, this is why gaming and gambling is so popular, but I don't know why I thought that. Here's another great line from Pascal. So what it is, we want our fulfillment. We seek it in diversions, escaping self-knowledge, but diversions won't give it to us because they're necessarily transient, here today and gone tomorrow, and they're finite. So we keep looking for more and more diversions, right, all the time, until somebody says, we want diversions from our diversions. So we go on the internet to look up about our favorite television shows. We want diversions from our diversions. So he says this, what else does this craving and this helplessness proclaim but that there was once in man a true happiness. This is an important line for me in my thesis. I'm going to try to get it in 5 minutes. Of which all that remains now is the empty print and trace. This infinite abyss can be filled only with an infinite and immutable object. In other words, by God himself. This is Pascal saying there's an empty place inside which only God can fill. And we keep trying to fill it up with the diversions. And it's never going to satisfy it, but we will continue to do so desperately. So Pascal says this, last page. If we're going to have true self-knowledge, we can't run away from ourselves with diversions. We have to face up to our dual condition. And here, I'll just do the second paragraph under this heading, in the interest of time, because it echoes Psalm 8 so beautifully. Pascal says, man must not be allowed to believe that he is equal either to the animals or to the angels. Remember Psalm 8 said we're a little lower than the angels, but have dominion? Nor is he to be unaware of either. He must know both. Christian teaching, Pascal says, is valuable because it illuminates and explains our true condition. It acknowledges the range of human behavior. It says we're the glory of the universe. Why? Because we've been made in the image of God. And it says we're the garbage of the universe. Why? Because we've fallen and sin has infected us. So Christian teaching, better than any other, Pascal believes, explains the human condition and gives us self-knowledge. Lets us know what it means to be human. And even better than explaining our situation, because what good is it when the doctor explains your disease and then says, can't do anything about it? Christianity offers the solution to our condition. I know that my Redeemer liveth. Right? We can be restored to the glory and the presence of God. And the effects of sin have been taken on by somebody else on our behalf. So that's Pascal. Got 5 minutes. Let's bring Pascal to Job, and especially the problem of the third speech cycle. What I'm going to argue is that Job, throughout this third speech cycle, as he's sitting there, embodies and is reflecting on the human condition. He is both great and wretched. Now his wretchedness is obvious, but his greatness is there, at least in memory. There was a time when he was one with God. I'm going to even say his greatness is still there because he refuses to sell out, because of his integrity. There's still some trace. There's still something in me that just says in Job, even though he's on the ash heap and he's got the sores and he's moaning and groaning, there's something great about that human being. If only because he knows that he wasn't meant for this. That there's still a trace of greatness there. So he both embodies and reflecting on the duality of the human condition. Look, and he does it in words. What does he say? A mortal born of woman, few of days and full of trouble, comes up like a flower and withers, flees like a shadow and does not last. Do you, God, fix your eye on such a one? Do you bring me into judgment with you? Who can bring a clean thing out of an unclean? Now there's the wretchedness, right? Born of trouble, die, unclean. But then look at this. Oh, that you would hide me in Sheol, that you would conceal me until your wrath is past, that you would appoint me at a set time and remember me. If mortals die, will they live again? All the days of my service I would wait until my release should come. You would call, and I would answer you. You would long for the work of your hands. For then you would not number my steps. You would not keep watch over my sin. My transgression would be sealed up in a bag, and you would cover over my iniquity. Isn't that Job yearning for glory? And to be restored to the presence of God? And notice he says both of those contradictory things in the same chapter. He both embodies and reflects the dual condition of man. That's why we say when we read Job, I'm him. Even if we're blessed not to have suffered that way. So think about this. His shifting, contradictory understandings of God, and that's what we see, not just in the third cycle throughout, reflect his awareness of duality. He sees God mostly, and I agree, the one who causes his suffering. But occasionally he sees God as the only one who was the source of his prior happiness, and the only one who may yet redeem him, restoring him to greatness and glory. And I say the only one because only God has the strength to do this, to give back this glory that now remains only an empty print and trace. Thus what Calvin says about human beings in general is true for Job in particular. The knowledge of ourself, both our benefits and our deficiencies, not only arouses us to seek God, but also, as it were, leads us by the hand to God. And now the question is, what kind of God is Job going to find? Go ahead, Glenn.
Possibly lead us then to examining what grace really means.
Okay. I'm being really cheap and chintzy here because I'm really making you suffer delayed gratification, because my last question, what should God, kind of God is he going to find? Really should take us immediately to 38, God speaking from the whirlwind. But we're not doing that next time. We're doing the search for wisdom, Job's insistence on his own innocence, and then this weird young whippersnapper named Elihu who comes in. So this is kind of, you're going to have to wait a couple, 3 weeks till we see what kind of God he finds. But I hope you see that I'm trying to say that the so-called inconsistency of Job in the third speech cycle is in fact a kind of inconsistency that's in all speech cycles. And it is true both to the psychology of grief, but also, this is the new thing for today, it's true to the human condition. Who we are as human beings and what it means to be human. And we're the ones asking the question now to God, what is man that thou art mindful of him? Good. Other questions, thoughts about this? We're just about out of time. Go.
It kind of seems like, though, it's not just a journey for Job to find out about God, as you're suggesting, it's a journey for Job also to find out about himself.
Absolutely. This is a journey. Calvin said, knowledge of God, knowledge of self go hand in hand. They grow together. And this is a journey of discovery of both God and himself. And I really want to be fair. My feelings aren't hurt if you want to say the third speech cycle is better explained by messed up text. Or the third speech cycle is better explained by Job speaking ironically. But I just think, rather than try to explain away the apparent inconsistencies of Job, honor them. Because they're truer and more profound. He's truer and more profound. The book is truer and more profound if they're there. Good, there was one hand up here. Yes, Karen.
Is there any other example in the Bible where everyone accepts that is messed up text and should be kept consistent?
Well, not even everyone accepts in Job that it's messed up text. That's why you get Ballantynes and others saying that it's an ironic, mimicking, mocking reading. The ancient world didn't see it, including through the Middle Ages, didn't see it as messed up. The idea of cutting and pasting the text has been relatively recent.
Is it just applied to Job?
Oh no, there are other places where people want to cut and paste the text. And these are good interpretive discussions we can have. You know, as I said, my concern is that always saying the inconsistency is the fault of the text rather than the fault of the interpreter. But there are times when we do have to just say it must be in the text as a last resort. Get there. Yes, good, Joe.
One example is the two versions of the Lord's Prayer.
Yeah.
Really messed up.
Perfect. Right.
Mark and Matthew have slightly different words.
Right. And there's lots of them. They're just not coming. That's a great example. There's also the dual endings of Mark. The Gospel of Mark has a longer and a shorter ending. I mean, there are real problems like this. This isn't the only one. Good. And I'll think of some more later when I'm driving home, and I'll be upset, so I'll probably text you. I know there are others. There's lots of them. Good. Other thoughts or questions about this? Well, Jim will be back next week, and that'll be fun. I'm looking forward to him coming back. And we will do 28, 29, 30, Job's search for wisdom, and then his self-defense. And then what we make of Elihu, I don't know, but you go read Elihu. He's this young guy who just shows up and talks a while and then blessedly goes away. All right, let's pray. Gracious God, thank you for this day. We ask that you would help us to know you and know ourselves. Lead us in your truth. Shape us into your people. Let us reach out in compassion to those who are suffering, and help us to be a witness to your kingdom in all that we say and do. And we pray this in Christ's name. Amen. Thank you all.